Hi, good afternoon everyone. My name is Vincent Koh from Singapore. I'm glad to be here this afternoon to share with you on the topic of how to carry out a professional Feng Shui audit of a house. Now, first of all, I would like to thank Jeanine and the committee member of the International Feng Shui Association of the Australian chapter for inviting me here this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, Feng Shui audit. Now, different Feng Shui masters have their own style when they carry out a Feng Shui audit. But whatever style you may have, there must be a systematic approach. In this presentation, I will show you how to carry out a systematic Feng Shui audit on a landed house and a high-rise apartment. I will show you how to carry out a systematic approach when you are doing a Feng Shui audit. First, when you receive a request from your client to carry out a Feng Shui audit, the first thing you must find out is what is the objective. What does the client want you to do? Now, in most cases, usually the clients will have relationship problems, or they may have children who cannot perform well in their studies. It could also be family members after moving into the bedrooms and they fall sick, and they want to know whether is it due to Feng Shui that causes the occupant to be sick, sleeping in that room. Or it could be many other things. So it is important for you to find out what are the objectives so that you will be mentally prepared before your approach. Now, different Feng Shui masters have their own style when they carry out a Feng Shui audit. Today, I'm here to show you how I carry out a Feng Shui audit. The next thing you need to do is to ask for the floor plan of the house, and also check with the client whether it is a landed house or is it a high-rise apartment. In addition, it is also good to ask a client how long they have moved in to this house. In addition, you must also ask for the birth dates of all the occupants who live in this house, so that you can make a preliminary studies before you approach your audit. Now, before you leave for the site, first thing you need to do is to check your low pan and make sure that your low pan is in order. Now, in addition, if you need to carry along with you any other additional tools, make sure they are all with you. Now, on your arrival, try to be early so that you have time to look around the external environment. In addition, it is also important for you to check where is the facing of the building or where is the facing of the house, so that later on when you want to take the right direction, you will know exactly where is the facing. Your audit should consist of the following steps. First, you must evaluate the external environment. Next, you must also identify the facing of the house. Third, you must evaluate the interior layout of each individual rooms, each individual levels if it is a multi-story. You must also identify where are the key areas of problem relative to your objectives. And most important is what will be your recommended cures and how do you present it to your clients. And finally, how do you evaluate whether your recommendation is correct or not. The external environment. Now, on your arrival, do not be too excited to go into the house. First of all, walk around the perimeter of the house, look at the landform, especially the back of the house, the front, the left, and the right. What sort of building structures are there? Is there any threatening sachi? All this should be recorded. Better still, if you have a camera, take some pictures of the area of concern which you think may influence the feng shui of the house. The next step, which is also very important, most people always overlook, is the vegetation. Whether the trees are growing well, the plants, the grass, the flowers. If there's a garden, look at the garden. Are they growing well? Are they well kept? This will give you a feel of the qi around the perimeter of the house. Now, in addition, it is also very important to study the flow of the water to the house. Now, obviously, in a modern city like Australia, in Melbourne, you may not have the privilege to have water in front of the house, especially if you are living in a modern city like Melbourne. So, when we talk about water flow, we are referring to the roads, the walkway. This will give us an indication of what our qi you are tapping into your house. Take a look at this slide here. When you are observing the external environment, take note of where are the tall buildings and where are the roads. Now, why is it necessary? Because in a modern city like Melbourne or even in Singapore, we do not have the privilege to have real mountain and real water around our environment where we stay. So therefore, we can use tall building to act as virtual mountain, while roads and crossroads can act as virtual water. You are observing the external environment. Ideally, in front of the house, we would like to have water. But unfortunately, in our modern living, we do not have the privilege with water in front of our house. Even in Singapore, we do not have that privilege either. Therefore, in modern environment, open space, roads, cross junction can replace actual water, and we call this virtual water. Next, highway can also represent river flow. Right? Expressway also can replace water flow. But more important is when you are looking at driveway or expressway, in particular in front of your house, observe the flow of the traffic. If it is too fast, then this may bring sachi to the front of your pool. Virtual mountain. Again, we can use tall buildings to replace or substitute actual mountain. Now, when you talk about mountain, ideally the mountain should be at the back of your house. Now, it is also important to observe the height of the mountain relative to your house. Mountain ideally should not be too high. Minimum, it should be same height with your roof. And also observe the distance, near and far. Observing the virtual water, there are two parts you need to clarify. First, let us look at this chart here. Assuming this is your house here, house E here, right? And this is the roads. Can you see here? And this is another road and another road here. Now, relative to this house, right, roads will be classified as river flow, while T-junctions or crossroad junction are deemed as the virtual pool. Now, in Feng Shui, usually we tap the pool at the road junction or at the crossroad junction. More important also, we must observe the traffic flow. Is it flowing from the left to the right or from the right to the left? Now, if it is a two-way traffic, you should consider the flow nearer to your house. Next, when you are talking about virtual mountain, also look across the road. Right? Building and houses opposite your house is also considered as virtual mountain. Right? In addition, also look at the left and look at the right side of the house. Are there buildings or is it an open space? If it is a building, we can consider it as a virtual mountain. If it is an open space, then we consider it as a virtual pool. In addition, you also have to look at the back of the house earlier on when we talk about mountain support. Right? Do you have virtual mountain behind? If there is, near or far, tall or short, all this should be properly observed and recorded. In addition, it is also important for you to take some snapshot so that later on when you go into the house, if you want to cross-check, you do not have to run out again. This may save you a lot of inconvenience later on. Now, while you are observing the external environment, it is also important that you should take note of whether there is any 煞气 that is facing directly to the building or to the house entrance door, and also observe the windows of the rooms, whether there are 煞气 that are pointing into the room's windows. All this should be recorded. After you have observed the external environment, the next step, which is very important, is to take the facing direction of the house. Now, when you are taking the facing direction of the house, you should take it from outside of the house and not inside the house. Right? Now, for landed property, when I say landed property, I'm referring to houses that are either a single story or a double story. It is very straightforward for you to identify where is the facing. Now remember, when we are talking about facing, the door facing sometimes may not necessarily be the facing of the house. Right? Especially Australian houses, you notice that they do have a main door and also have a garage. They park the car in the garage and they may have a side door to get into the house. Therefore, this part is very important. If a house has more than one door, you have to identify which is the main door. And again, remember, the main door is not necessarily the facing of the house. For high-rise building, it is also very important. The facing of the building may not necessarily be the facing of your house or your apartment. Let me elaborate on a high-rise building. How do we identify the facing? Let's take a look at this slide over here. Now, this is the building. Here is the guardhouse. Your unit could be somewhere at the corner here. Right? Now, when we are talking about facing, right, it could be the facing of the entrance into the building. It could be the door into the building, and it could be the door into your unit. But however, when we are talking about direction, we should be talking about the direction of your unit. Therefore, it is important for you to take an external view and make sure that you are confident of where is the facing of the unit. Then only you take the reading with your low pan. Taking of directions. Now, if you use the practice of 八宅 or the 8 house method, then houses are divided into 8 directions here. But however, in my practice, I use the 24 mountain system, which is called the flying stars. Houses are divided into 24 divisions. Example, when we say north, it could be N1, N or N2, because different mountains have different birth chart. After you have taken the reading of the facing, the next step is the age of the house. Now when you talk about the age of the house, this part is a bit tricky. Age of the house. The age of the house is where the house is completed. It's just like a baby is born. This is your birthday. So a house is also the same. When is it completed? So in our Singapore tax of completion, a house is deemed completed if TOP is being issued. In other words, means you can occupy the building or the house if the permit is issued to you. That is considered the age of the house. Now, what about people who just moved in today or moved in yesterday? So should we take the original date of the house or should we take the move-in date? Now, in my practice, I take the move-in date as the age of the house. And together with the facing direction based on 24 mountain and the age of the house, we can erect the birth chart of the house. Let's look at the example here. Assuming if our client wants us to select a unit in the building here, right? There are 4 units. You can see here A, B, C, and D. And the client may ask you which unit has good feng shui. So based on this facing and the age of the house, in this case, let's assume that this is the age of the 7th house, right? And the sitting is N1 facing S1. It is also important for you to record down the degrees of your reading. This birth chart here superimposed into the layout of the building floor plan, and from here you can identify which unit has good feng shui and also can match the occupant of the house. Now in this talk here, I will not go into the details of how we can use the birth date and the flying star chart to match into the house. Let's come back to the house again. Now remember, when you are taking the reading for the facing of the house, you must identify where is the facing. And remember, I said that before. The facing of the door is not necessarily the facing of the house. Now once you have identified the facing of the house, right, you should take the reading facing the house, stand at the center and take the reading, right? Okay. Once you have noted the reading, it is also important for you to write down what is the degree of the facing. After you have taken the facing direction of the house, next you have to take the facing of the main door. Now the main door is very important. Ideally, the main door should not be lying on the blind spot. When I talk about blind spot, means it lies in between the center line of the 2 mountains here. Okay. Now, if the house door falls on the blind spot, this one is easily treated. We can make an adjustment to the door. But however, if the house falls on the blind spot, then this may be a problem. But in this presentation here, I will not discuss in detail on houses fall under blind spot. Now after we have taken the direction of the house facing, remember, not the door facing, we have the house facing, together with the age of the house, we can erect the birth chart of the house. After erecting the birth chart, make sure that you have the right chart with you. Of course, today we have software for you to convert the information into the birth chart here. But even that, you must check and make sure that it is correct. Now, after you have the birth chart, together with the floor plan, you superimpose the birth chart onto the house floor plan. Now, once you have superimposed the birth chart into the floor plan, we can immediately identify where are the respective sector and lying on which direction. And more importantly is, where is the main door? Is it lying in a good sector with timely water stars? Now the next step, which is very important, that is where the actual audit commences. When you enter the house, do not be too excited. Okay? You should walk around the house and make sure you are familiar with the overall layout. Usually, I start from the living room. Okay? I will record down where are the sitting area, where are the appliances, example the TV, the hi-fi set, is there any water features? Then we proceed to the living room. Where is the dining set? Where is the dining table? Is there a bar counter? Next, we go into the kitchen. Take note of where is the position of the stove, where is the position of the wash basin, and then we go to the backyard. Where is the wash area? Now all this should be recorded along the way, and in addition, take some Photoshop while you're walking around the house. After you have gone through the following areas, which I just mentioned earlier on, the next important area is the bedrooms. Okay? Check with the client who occupied which room. And then you go room to room. Now when you are visiting the room, it is important for you to take note. First is who sleep in this room. Example, room 1. Look at the bed position. Look at the color scheme. Look out of the window. Is there any sa-chi? And in addition, there may be TV in the room. Where is it? There could be hi-fi. There could be study table. All this again should be noted and take pictures. Next, you should also check with the client, okay, what are the problems that may have arisen to the occupants. Example, the client may say, after my son moved into this room, he falls sick very often, which never happened before. Even going to doctors say nothing wrong with him, and yet he's always sick. Is it due to the feng shui of the room? Therefore, it is important for you to take note of this information. Or it could be in a master bedroom, where after moving in, the master of the house career is not moving, very stagnant, or his business could be going downstream. Now remember, while you are observing all this information, you should be precisely recorded. Talking about bedrooms. Now, when you want to check whether the beds are lying in the good sector of the occupant who live in this room, you should bring the birth chart into the center of the bedroom and check which are his auspicious sector and direction relative to his birth data. This is very important. Next, it is also important for you to check while you are in the room, look out of the window. Is there any sa-chi that is pointing into the window? And worse still, it could be pointing directly onto the bed where the occupant is sleeping. All this should also be observed and noted. You should also carry on the same process using the micro-analysis room to room, and also counter-check with each occupant who occupies the bedrooms. After you have gone through the assessment of the internal layout of the house, it is also good for you to walk out of the main door again and look out what is facing the main door. Right? In some houses, they may have an open garden and we can treat that as a virtual pool. Some houses may be facing directly of incoming roads, or sometimes it could be facing a highway. All these also should be noted in your audit, and whether they have influence into the feng shui of the house. After you have completed your assessment of the external environment and the internal layout, you must be able to identify where are the areas of concern relative to the objective. Now, making the presentation. As an amateur or maybe as a beginner, you may not be able to make an immediate presentation to the client. Therefore, you should tell the client that you need to go back to study, make an assessment before you can do the presentation to the client. Usually, this should not take more than a week for you to come back to the client. However, for my case, after I've collected all this information, I'm able to do an immediate presentation to the client. Now, when you are making a presentation to your client, make sure that your presentation is clear and understandable. Right? More important is if any adjustment that need to be made or any alteration that need to be made to the house, you must make sure that it is practical. It must also be achievable, and more important, should not be too costly and cause inconvenience to your client. Now, when you are making the recommendation, you should go to individuals' occupants. This you should cross-check with the 4 pillars information which you earlier had taken down. Go through one by one with the client. Example, if the client want to talk about the husband, why the career is not doing well, is it due to his 4-pillar luck cycle, he's not in good luck currently, or is he in good luck and yet he is not performing well? And you can also look at the children, why they are not performing well. Is it due to the house feng shui? Is it due to the bed position? Or is it due to the study corner that they are not sitting in their auspicious direction? All this we can use each individual 4 pillars to cross-check. Now, finally, if there is any placement that is required, you must also make it very clear to the client and record on the floor plan, which you are going to present to the client later on, precisely what you want to recommend and what you want to place in that sector. Now, in addition, if there is any adjustment that need to be made, it is also important that you should put it on the floor plan to show the client how it should be done. Right. Next, after all this has been recommended to the client, you must make sure that the client will follow your instruction correctly. Now, in addition, it's also important that you must look into the annual flying stars and how this is going to influence the feng shui of the house. Right? Example, let's say year 2010, right? Where are the potent stars coming and from which direction it is coming to? Example, 2, 3, and 5. As you can see, in the year 2010, star number 2 comes in from northeast, star 5 comes from southwest, and star 3 coming from the south. Take note where are these locations in the house, and this should be treated. Now, in addition, of course, the timely stars here, 8, 9, and 1, it should be activated and take advantage of. Feng Shui kiosks. Now, today in our high-tech society, there are many products used for Feng Shui kiosks. Now, when you recommend Feng Shui kiosks, you must also consider the decor of the house. Will it match or not? Does the client likes it or not. Right? You cannot insist that you must use this or you must use that. More important is, why do you need to use it? You should not cause inconvenience to the client. And also make sure that the client has an alternative. If he cannot use A or he cannot find A, what about B, C, or D? Right? Also, to be fair to the client, the Feng Shui kiosk product must not be too costly. Right? Thus the client has a choice. Now, at the end of the day, it's very important before you leave your client is to check with your client whether you have achieved the client's objective. Right? Your recommendation to the client, is it clear? Now, it is also important for you to keep a record of your findings, right? Your audits, your recommendation, so that you can come back to do an evaluation after the client has carried out your recommendations. Confidentiality. Now remember, it is important for you to keep your findings and whatever information your client has given to you, you must make sure that you should not divulge to others, because this is our professional integrity. So, to summarize, when you carry out a Feng Shui audit, first of all, check your tools. Be familiar with the location. On your arrival, try to be early, walk around, take note of the external environment, the buildings, the roads, virtual water, virtual mountain. Also observe the vegetation. Next, take the reading of the house, take the reading of the doors, and then you go into the house, record down what are the furnishings in the house, who sleep in which room, and which occupant has problems, and what are their problems. And from there, you identify which are the areas that cause problem to the occupants. Record it down properly. Take photographic record. Right? If you need time to go back to assess, then you tell the client you probably need 1 week before you can do the presentation. If not, like I say, in my case, I can give immediate recommendation and Feng Shui kiosk. Now, when you are doing your presentation, make sure your presentation to the client must be clear, because sometimes when a client is depressed, okay, they may not be understood of what you are trying to talk to them. So it is also good that whatever you recommend to the client, what to do and need to be done, should be properly recorded on the floor plan, if not on writing. Now, most importantly, as a professional, your recommendation or any adjustment required should not be too costly and cause inconvenience to your client. And also, if the client needs to purchase any Feng Shui products for Feng Shui cure purposes, it must be available and must not be too costly. And also, does the client have a choice from what you recommend? And finally, all your findings should be properly recorded for your future reference, because your client may call you back and ask you for certain information which you can refer to. And lastly, don't forget, it is your responsibility to come back to review whether the client has carried out your instruction and your recommendation correctly or not. With this, I hope it will help you in the next Feng Shui audit. And I hope in the near future, I can come back again and share with you more. Thank you. Goodbye.